Yes.
Is there? I can put here some space.
Okay, thank you. It's very kind. Look at all this. I should give talks more often and get these kind of treats all the time.
Oh, goodness.
Hi, folks. Thank you for joining. Is anyone here? There are two people. I enjoy if you make a comment saying that you are here so I can know that you are really here. It says there are two people, but who's to know? I'm not Kalanyani. I am Ayya Sudhamma. I hope you can hear me okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang saranang gacchami. The topic of today's talk is on being right, or I might rename it the perils of being right. Hello, so we have Vincent and Lenny. Hello. Yes. Okay, very good. Thank you. It's a little bit warm here today. Good. Thank you. Who doesn't want to be right? I like being right. Every now and then I make some obvious prediction and it comes true and I'm quite triumphant. Anyone else like this? For example, the other day I was certain it was going to rain. We got caught up in a terrible thunderstorm because unfortunately I was right. Teasing somebody in the background there. Being right is fun. It's tasty. It's delicious. Being right is it's one of the most wonderful things. Maybe aversive people have a bit more of a weakness in this inclination than other types of people. I'm kind of a hater. Fortunately, it takes a little while to get to know me to know that. The nuns are shocked, I tell you. What? She's a hater? Oh, I'm such a hater by nature. Born to hate. Fortunately, it is calmed down enough that most of the rest of it can be hidden away most of the time. Anyway, I think especially us haters really want to be right because being wrong just feels so bad. And so then getting to be right is just it's like winning some kind of trophy. Alex wants to know. I remember him. Absolutely, Alex. Good to see you. Glad you're here. Okay. Anybody else coming? You can put me a little note on the side. It'll interrupt me. That's okay. I'll interrupt myself if you don't interrupt me. So, okay, again, for those who have just arrived, the talk is on being right, or subtitled The Perils of Being Right. So the Buddha talked about, in other contexts, talked about the gratification, the danger, and the escape in various contexts. And he would analyze it in terms of the aggregates or the sense bases and so forth. Or maybe just in general, the world. And let's see, I'm going to quote something here. I'm going to pull it up from a screenshot on the phone. A quote I came across online. When I was still a bodhisattva, the Buddha is quoted as saying, "It occurred to me, what is the gratification in the world? What is the danger in the world? What is the escape from the world?" I don't have a cite here. I hope it's a good translation. Then it occurred to me, whatever pleasure and joy there is in the world, this is the gratification in the world. That the world is impermanent, bound up with suffering, and subject to change. This is the danger in the world. The removal and abandoning of desire and sensual lust for the world, this is the escape from the world. As long as he didn't really know all of this as it actually is, he did not claim to be awakened. And when he really understood it, really got it, then he did. All right, well, let's look specifically at this business of being right. So it's delightful to be right, when you get the directions correct. It's delightful to be right when someone else insists on something and you finally get proven correct. You get this validation. It's delightful to be right when large numbers of people are wrong, or your dear loved one, or anything in between. It's great to be right. It's delightful to be right when you have like this moral upper hand, like you know what's true and false, you know what is moral or immoral. These other people don't get it, and in that way you get to be right, like a righteous right. There's being right about that these and these circumstances occurred or will occur, that these scientific facts are such and such, that some things that can be proven. There's being right about other people's motives, being right about stock market. Hello, more people. Thank you for your comments. There's just no end to ways that we can have that little moment of triumph that, yeah, I had it right. One time when I was visiting Sri Lanka, the other nuns and I were practicing for my ordination, our ordination. And we were practicing for hours, and someone said, "What time is it?" I guessed what time it was. And then a few minutes later, went out and saw a clock, and I'd gotten it right, down to the minute. And I declared to my friend, I had it right. And she said, that must make you very special, doesn't it? So I crawled away from that encounter. But it does make us feel very special, right? That I got to know this thing that not everybody necessarily knew, kind of that insider sense, or that sense of being special. So this is the gratification of being right. There are so many ways that we can derive some sense of pleasure or belonging or superiority, some kind of identity, that I or you have the knowledge, the information, the insight, the skill, the whatever, that we got to be proven in some way right. That's a gratification. It is truly, actually delightful. And some of us, as I mentioned, are really subject to that. find it incredibly enticing. All right, but the mode that I was setting up here is gratification, danger, and escape. As we find regarding the world and regarding aggregates and sense bases and so many ways of approaching, so many things that can be approached that way. Gratification, danger, and escape. I want to look at the downsides and shortcomings of being right so thoroughly that you might perhaps lose your enchantment with it. That's my hope in this talk today. And if that's not what you want, you can leave without me really noticing, I think, because all I see is a number there. I don't actually see people. So I'm so grateful to several nun friends who are sitting right in front of me here at Aninja Vihara, giving me people to talk to, because you guys are just, see, it went 12 to 13 to 12, somebody vanished. Who knows what they might have learned? They're probably the one person who needed this the most. Okay. So let's say that you, wow, there's so many ways to go with this. Okay. You are right. Let's just grant this. We're going to pick over what it actually is to be right, but let's just grant it for a moment that you, my friend, are on this occasion right. Like you correctly saw somebody do something that didn't work or was very unskillful or whatever it was. You got that. Okay. Well, where do we go with it from there? Because let's say you actually did, and this is something to become very skeptical of, but let's say that on some occasion, somehow you did get it absolutely, indisputably so that you are right. What can you do with that? The Buddha, when somebody wants to offer constructive criticism to another person, that is, I am right about something, you are wrong about something, maybe something you did, and I'm going to help you see your error and help you to do things in a better way. He didn't just start and stop with, you've got the facts right. He actually gave 15 factors to consider before you open your mouth, even if you were somehow absolutely right. I don't know. You guys know these 15 factors? 3 sets of 5? It's not one I hear spoken of very much. It's elaborated in detail in the Vinaya. But see, it's in a conversation with the Vinaya master Chunna and the Buddha. Chunna. No, Upali and the Buddha. And I thought I had the citation, right? Yeah. It's in the, if anyone wants to look it up, it's in the Parivara 17.5. So what are these 15 things that you would need to consider before you even dare to open your mouth to talk to somebody on something that you are quite sure you're right about? I've broken them down into a few categories. Who am I to speak? How do I speak? And why do I speak? And that is, shuffle my notes around here. Where did they go? Okay. So who am I to speak? Am I somebody who is above reproach in my physical behavior and my verbal behavior? That's 2 of them. Because if I'm not, then I'm trying to correct somebody else about those sorts of things. Then the hypocrisy will be appalling to them, and they just can't hear it. Am I somebody who is knowledgeable about relevant body of knowledge? In the case of the monks, do you really know the Dhamma well? Another one is, do you know the Vinaya well? That is, do you know the rules and protocols? So do you know the facts related to whatever it is that you want to offer somebody some constructive criticism on? And do you know the rules, the protocols around this quite well? Are you really thorough in this? Because if not, some people are going to turn around and say, oh, you need to go learn this stuff yourself, friend. Am I someone who's generally known as being loving? Because if I'm not, people's walls will go up even before I speak. So that's the first 5. Who am I? Who am I to speak up with somebody? Even though we're just assuming that I'm right. Okay, and assuming I'm right, how do I go about making some sort of correction to somebody who is, of course, I'm right, they must be wrong in some way? Well, how do you do it? You need to speak to them in a manner that's timely, truthful, gentle, for their benefit, and with a heart of loving kindness, in a manner of loving kindness. Though that might sound simple, but it's actually quite difficult, quite complex, because timing includes their state of mind, whether other people are listening. It includes whether they're in a hurry, whether they've had some large disappointment just before this. Like, there's a lot of skill we need to bring up to have the timing down. Then truthfulness seems pretty straightforward. You're already right. So what else is there? Well, what about exaggeration? What about adding innuendo, gossip, things that are not really proven? Bringing those up, you can cause a person to recoil quite strongly, even though everything else is well in order. Gentleness. Have you ever heard someone say to you or to another person, or maybe you yourself have said, it's not what you said, it's how you said it? The gentleness of a message is impacted by word choice, tone, and even the message itself. Perhaps what the greater message you wanted to give was to your child that they need to study for school so that they can enjoy success. But the words that come out of your mouth are, you're always going to fail. How cutting is that, right? That would be appalling. So there are words that we simply should not use because the words cut. There are, whether it's a cultural thing for the listener or just some words are inherently prickly and harsh. And then, of course, tone. Tone can be so powerful. You can turn anything into sounding like a curse. You can even say thank you in a way that makes it sound like you hate them. Thanks. So the tone is also powerfully impactful on the communication. So timely, truthful, gentle, intended for well-being. And you may have other motives that you haven't really looked deeply at. You might just be enjoying being right. You might want to enjoy embarrassing them. You might enjoy being superior. There might be all kinds of other things going on. What's the motivation? Are you really trying to help them and other people? And if that's not the motivation, everybody's going to know it. It's going to come across. They'll know it. And again, if there's not love in the heart, you can have everything else correct, but have an iciness of heart. That will come through. So these 5 factors are actually absolutely necessary, critical, in the sense that you might have any of the other, there are 15 total, you could have any of the others off base a bit, but if you mess up on any of these 5, the Buddha said that the person has no reason for remorse. You, the speaker, have reason for remorse, but I was the one who was right. Being right isn't everything. Being right is just the start. Being right is just the start. That's the starting point. If you can even get to the point where you're really confident you're right, and we haven't even begun to untangle that thread. So, but assuming you can, and you are, and you know that you're right, all these other factors come in as to how you handle and manage that reality. The next 5 are about motivation. And the Buddha suggested the motivation ought to be compassion, to be of benefit, out of sympathy, for the idea of clearing offenses, and the idea of prioritizing the training. So again, this is in the context of monks. But you want to ward off future bad results. You want things to go well and smoothly for your community, for the individual. You want to have empathy, compassion. Like if you're coming from a place like that, this is very good. But again, who am I and why am I wanting to speak truth to this person? While they're important, the most important bit are the 5 on how is it communicated. Timely, truthful, gentle, timely, truthful, Gentle, I lost it, for the benefit and with loving kindness. Now, this was among bhikkhus. These are people who ostensibly, in theory, have absolutely have dedicated their lives to spiritual development, right? I mean, at least ideally, that's the deal, right? And yet, they can be so prickly, so touchy, that even another bhikkhu had better be very, very careful in speaking some sort of unwanted truth to them. And if that's the case among renunciates, how much more so for ordinary folks living ordinary lives who just want to have a little more pleasure and a little less pain? I would suggest being very, very cautious. Once you've gotten hold of that truth somehow or other, how you wield it is going to make your life easier or very, very miserable. So again, let's still assume that you've got all the facts right. There are other considerations of what is right. How about context? Let's say somebody sped through your neighborhood and you're really mad about it and you report them and you cause them as much trouble as possible. And then everyone is mad at you because they were rushing home to a family member who was having a heart attack. Worth it? So that is just one random example we could make up out of many. Context. Maybe you saw one kid get 2 of a treat, and so you want to take it away from them and give it to another, or you want to criticize. But you don't know the context that yesterday they didn't get any and others got 10. So perhaps you can see how you may have the facts, you're right with the facts to an extent, but there could be just a little bit more background info that could change the whole picture for you. You see that? Another angle to that, let's say somebody refuses to get out of your parking space, and it becomes a big thing. They're just standing there, they're refusing to get out of the parking space, you have a big argument with them. The reason they're doing it is because they are protesting a terrible thing that your company did that caused 100,000 people to lose their lives. Do you really still have the high road here? How right are you? So there can be other moral concerns among context that we could take into consideration that could really affect whether being right actually is right in the bigger picture. And here's one that might throw you a little bit. And I'll tell a story to illustrate it before I explain. On one occasion in my home monastery, there was a circumstance where people wanted to use a certain monastery vehicle, excuse me. And so there was some clashing around that, and I created a sign-out sheet, and everybody in the community agreed that before they would take the vehicle, they would sign it out. Well, it turned out that I had signed up for the vehicle weeks in advance, and somebody else wanted it at the last minute, and there was a little bit of a kerfluffle, little conflict. And we had a residence meeting at which this was raised, and the teacher tried to say one thing, the master of the monastery, the elder great monk tried to say one thing, but I was right. And I talked over him, and I pursued my perspective. I was right in every way. I had signed up for that vehicle weeks in advance. I had permission for the purpose of the vehicle, for that purpose of taking the vehicle. And these other people, if they had wanted it, they could have signed up for it well in advance themselves, just because they were doing something for the monastery. And mine was a personal consideration, had nothing to do with it. The teacher tried to talk and I wasn't hearing it. I was right. So later it occurred to me that I'd been rude to my teacher in front of everybody again. And it was not an unusual sight at my home monastery, the Bhavana Society, for, I don't remember now if I was a nun or a laywoman then at that point. Anyway, this novice or this laywoman, whichever I was at the time, to be on my knees in front of the master saying, sorry. It just wasn't all that unusual. And so I made my apology and he kind of nodded. And then I said, but I was right. And Bhantiji, bless him, he didn't say anything. He just looked over my shoulder, out the window, out into the distance. And he said, maybe you better think about that a little more. And so I just sat back and I did. I thought about it. I can be a sharp cookie in my way sometimes. I could have written a thesis paper on how I was right. I could have written like 20 pages, single-spaced, typed on it, all the ways that my cause was the correct one. And that the only correct perspective would be to uphold my rights to that vehicle on that occasion. There was just really no way around it. I was right. I was righteously right. And then it occurred to me that if there is greed, hatred, or delusion in the mind, then I'm not right. No matter how good my facts are, no matter how many pages, single-spaced or double-spaced, that I could come up with to defend my perspective, if there's greed or hate or delusion in the mind, I am not right in any way that is meaningful. And I said this to Bhantiji, and he looked at me with this little glint in his eye, like, oh, you got that. And I bowed at his feet, and I never argued with him again. No, actually, these things take a little bit of decades to get better at. But it was like what I had thought was solid wall. I discovered had a door in it, and I couldn't always open the door. I couldn't always find the outlines even of the door, but I knew it was there from then on. I couldn't deny that it's there. Somewhere in the back of my mind from then on, I knew that no matter how right I may be as to fact, no matter how provable it could be, no matter how many witnesses I have and how many people signing on to my cause, if my mind is in greed, hatred, or delusion, I'm not right. Perhaps you can see how that might apply to you. You might have some issues going on in your life where you know that you are very, very right. And you just don't see how you could possibly be missing something about it. But the very thing that you might be missing is that your mind is in an unclear, unwholesome, disturbed state. It makes it impossible. Makes it impossible to be spiritually right. And if we're not spiritually right, we're not right. So I'm just going to add this little detail here. It may land for a few of you. Every now and then I get a person who's, in my mind, delightful. The world may find them socially awkward, maybe slightly neurodivergent. And they come to me and they say, oh, my partner is angry at me over nothing. And I say, really? They're like, yeah. Or they say, I have no idea what her problem is. I'm like, what did you do exactly? And they tell me something, and I sit there wincing quietly. And then I say, has she left you yet? So they tell me how far down the road this problem has gone. Has she left yet? Has she packed yet? I'm saying she because it's usually some hapless guy who somehow missed some really important social signals and is profoundly offended a female partner. I'm just saying, like, this won't land for everybody. And all I could say with that is that if you know that this has happened with you before, then the next time your partner is all up in arms, even though you know 100% you're right, go get some second opinions from people who don't tend to agree with you. That's the important bit there. Go get more than one second opinion, not from people who tend to agree with you. And see if there might be some aspect of context that changes everything from other people's point of view, so that you can then adjust your view or your words or actions in order to have harmony at home. All right, now I want to get into the last bit of this nitty-gritty business of being right. Are you really? Let's say you heard something with your own ears, or you saw something with your own eyes, and therefore you know you have got the facts, you are right. A long time ago, I took a class on legal evidence for the courts. And one of the things we studied was the reliability of witness testimony. And there was a scientific study, or anthropological. Anyway, there was a study done on this is back before people did a lot of trickery for TikTok and that sort of thing, where they set up what appeared to be a robbery in a train station, a metro station, and they had they had a fake victim, they had a fake robber who comes along, grabs the purse, and runs off with it. And then they would question, they pretended like the whole thing was real, and then they pretended to be police questioning the people. There are probably laws against this sort of thing now. There should be. Anyway, they questioned the poor witnesses. What did they see? And one of the key elements that they asked about was the question of, was there a weapon? There was not a weapon, but a large number of people perceived a weapon. And if I recall this study correctly, this is many, many years ago now, but if I recall correctly, it broke down according to the race of the witness and the race of the offender, the thief, as to whether they saw a weapon. So this was a very significant for me source of insight into the unreliability of what we see with our own eyes. Those people sitting there saw this faked robbery right in front of them, and then they made up details. They didn't know they were lying. They were sincere. They really didn't see what they thought they saw. So you saw something yourself happened. That neighbor did hit your mailbox, or whatever it is you witnessed yourself. I think it's really good if we can understand that this business of memory is as impermanent and subject to change, as unreliable as everything else in samsara. Those little brain cells that you think are going to contain all the information and hold it just right forever, not going to do it. If you ever blanked on a name, could not think of somebody's name that you knew quite well, in other moments what their name was, then you might have enough reason to know that everything you've ever witnessed ought to be held kind of loosely in your hand. So the Buddha mentioned in one sutta about how to preserve truth. He pointed out that when you say, this is what is reality, this is the only way, nothing else could be true, then you're not really preserving truth. If you do say, this is my perception, this is my understanding, this is my memory, this is what I think I saw, then you would be preserving truth. Anybody recall that particular sutta? Do you have the exact quotes in mind? It's been a while since I saw that one. That one also kind of stayed with me. Like, wow, yeah, if you want to preserve truth, there's a little bit of hedging that we need to have there. When we want to declare it is exactly like this and no other way, I know this for myself, this is the truth, well, we're fooling ourselves. It cannot be. It cannot be the case. You cannot know it that clearly because we don't have that privilege. We don't get it like that in life. We have our perceptions, we have our memories, we have our thoughts, we have our understandings, we have our beliefs. We do not have an ultimate truth to turn to and look up and hold and say, this is it, and I've got it, and this is what it is forever and ever. Amen. We can't do that. It's not given to us. Well, what about what we hear? Never mind what we see. Okay, obviously sight can be a little tricky. What about what we hear? We've got two of these. They must be right. Right? We've got two of them. And they're ready to listen. So let's say you heard the words of another person, and those words were offensive. You took offense. You know exactly what it meant. And you go around testifying that to all your friends. Also known as gossip. But anyway, okay. So you heard something. So do you know exactly what was in the person's mind? Well, actually, what you heard was one thing. Well, let's say they formed an intention to make a communication. And once they formed the intention to make the communication, they chose the words. But have you ever chosen words and they come out and you realize they weren't the right words for your intention? It could be something as simple as move that big chair, but what you meant to say was move the chair that has the stuffing on it, but there's actually a much bigger chair. And they're moving the bigger chair, but you meant the big chair with the stuffing, not the big chair. Kind of dumb example, but your intention was one thing, but the words chosen actually didn't fully reflect that. Okay, well, never mind that. Let's say that somehow you got the exact right words for the intention in your mind, but then you open your mouth to speak and your words come out something else. Has that happened? You have the right words in your mind, in your heart, you're going to say this, and it blah, 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 blah. Your words just stumble. Okay, but let's say the words were exactly correct. You got the words out that formed the thought that you had, that formed the intention that you had to communicate. All right. Well, what does it mean that words came out? That means that your lips and your tongue and your jaw moved in certain ways, expelling air, such that sound waves went whoa, 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 in a certain way through the air towards another person. By the time the sound waves get to the ear of the other person, are they perfectly the same as when they left your mouth? Not always. A truck could go by A truck could go by, or the wind could blow. Wind knocks off sound waves. Didn't you know that? Wind messes up sound waves sometimes. Some birds could make a loud sound, or something could cause you to turn your head suddenly, which could distort the putting forth of some of those syllables. Maybe a word like not could get lost. that could be important. There are other words that could get lost. Okay, but let's pretend for a moment that, let's see if I can remember all this, that the intention to have a communication formed the correct words for that intention in the mind. And then those words went to the mouth correctly, and the mouth formed those words exactly as was intended, so that the words at the mouth, the movements of the lips and so forth, match the original intention. Sound waves go out exactly matching the intention, all of that. And the sound waves reach the ear of the other person. Well, what if they're hard of hearing? What if somebody says, hey, look at that, right at the same moment? Whoop. Oh, you say something? Because their consciousness actually has to be there, ready to receive the words, like a catcher with the mitt behind the what is it, home base. Just as the ball comes, they have to be ready to catch it. But maybe they're not ready. I just remembered a funny story. The biggest trouble I ever got into in my home monastery. Wasn't funny at the time. I'm going to finish this thought, then I'm going to tell you that story. Let's say that by some miracle, the sound waves that hit this person's ear are such that those very words that you intended to say could be formed, and they're not distracted, and there's not something else that intervenes in that very moment, and they're ready and receptive and listening, and they catch it from the very beginning, which is what didn't happen for me in that story I'm going to tell you. And let's say now, well, did you know science and scientists figured out that you don't actually hear every word a person says. You hear I think it's every third word, and you guess the rest. Sit with that for a minute. Oh, some of you might not have heard that. I said that the scientists have figured out that I think it's every third word that a person actually hears. They make up the other words to match what they are hearing. Because that's just how the brain works, apparently. So even just a little bit of hearing loss can have a very profound impact, because each time you catch a word correctly, it guides you along a certain path of communication. But you mess one word up. You think you heard blue, and what they said was bones or something. Then you've gotten onto a wrong path, and you may have to backtrack and have some further communication to figure out what was actually said, so that, again, you can be replacing the missing words that you're not hearing accurately. Or what if somebody's very tired? You think their ability to replace the missing words is as skilled as when they're at their best? What if they're anxious? What if they're angry? You think an angry person is going to do that little word replacement task accurately? In fact, what I realized some time ago is that I had better make my intentions very, very wholesome before I speak. Because when my heart is in a wholesome place and I'm speaking, people hear whatever they hear. It's usually not what I said, but sometimes people say, "Oh, I love your talk." And I said, "What did you hear?" And they quote something I never said. So I figured out that if my heart, my mind is in a wholesome place, the word replacement is going to be wholesome choices, or more likely to be. It's going to be a more trusted communication. And if my heart is in an angry place, a deluded place, a hateful place, a resentful place, a jealous, frightened, shut down, scared, needy, grasping, um, troubled place, guess what kind of words they're going to replace my words with? The missing words of communication, where they hear an actual word and then guess another couple of words and hear a word and guess a couple. Guess what they're going to replace it with? Unwholesome stuff. They're going to hate me for whatever I said, though I never said it. They made me very cautious about speech, or at least in theory. I tend to forget this. While I'm talking about it, I'm going, oh my, this is really bad. This is really scary. So, how sure are we that we know the facts? We heard it for our own selves. We saw it our own selves. So, okay, well, let's get past all of this. Let's say that you got past all of the word replacements. You got past all of the obstacles that could cause the sound waves to be different. Of course, all the obstacles of your own ability to hear correctly the syllables that are coming to your ear. I mean, people have different skill levels. 3 people could hear a sentence and maybe only one of them heard it correctly to understand and say, oh, they said to walk this way. The others are like, no, I thought they said, no, I heard it correctly. Like people are different in their skill level and different at different times, probably different at different times of day even. Anyway, all that to say, this is pretty scary stuff. So when next time you go to take a stand, I'm right. I know I'm right. Are you? How, can you really be that sure of the facts of the case? But even if you are sure of the facts of the case, what about context? Do you actually know everything about it? I've often heard it said to the effect of that if you knew everything about a person, you'd have to love them. You'd have to have sympathy for them. If you really knew everything. If you knew a lot, but not everything, you could hate them more passionately than anyone you ever hated. But if you know everything, really everything, you'd have to hate, you'd have to love them. You'd have to empathize. Where was I? Oh yeah, context. Do you really have all the context? 100%? You know that for a fact? Mm-hmm. You really have the high moral ground here? You know that for sure? You know it for a fact? Is your heart completely freed from greed, hatred, and delusion, or at least enough so to be fairly reliable in this moment? You sure of it? Okay, so you get to be right. Let's say you really get to be right. You got all that down. What about next moment? It all changes. All of it changes. Samsara doesn't stop just because you got to be right for a second. Samsara keeps going with its little relentlessness. Relentless, almost said relentless self, but that just got confusing. The relentlessness of samsara's unreliability just keeps going. Being right yesterday doesn't make you right today. Memory. You might have remembered it just perfectly, except that you didn't. You had it all correct yesterday. Today, the mind's a little fuzzy on the details. You're starting to recite it with that confidence you have from being so right yesterday, and then start to, no, actually, what they said was, oh, no, actually, no, it was before, no, it was before that. No, actually, it was after the, yeah. So, if you get to be right, and you get to be right a lot, you get to be right every day, you get to glory in it, good luck. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that the the gratification and the danger are not yet clear to where you want the escape. What's the escape? Give it up. The desire for it, the delight in it. See the downsides. Yes, being right is just delicious. It's the most wonderful thing when you get to enjoy it, but all those downsides, all the unlikelihood that it's really so or that it could persist in any meaningful way are just too weighty. That's the danger. And here's the escape. Don't delight in it. Let it be. Maybe you got to be right. Briefly. Maybe. And that is my talk to you today. All right, I see some comments. Let's go explore these comments. Oh, my old buddy Alex. What do you think of the famous military quote? A good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan next week. General George Patton. Well, I think that I think what he's getting at there is that it's impossible to get anything done perfectly. And when people are waiting around for all the factors to come together in a perfect way, they may miss their chance. The wording of it, though, is kind of hard to swallow, this business of violently executing a plan by somebody for whom violence actually means killing. It's kind of a hard one to find any pleasure in. But I can certainly see where that could be coming from, that could be useful for some people in some context. I don't see any other written questions. I invite you to see about that. I don't. 2:52. Okay, we've got some little time for questions. We end at 3, is it? Is that right? Okay. How about you, Venerables? Do you have any question? Something for discussion?
I'm quite curious about what you said that you just.
I am so sorry. Thank you. I completely forgot because you see how perfect my memory is. But you got to be right. Yes, I did not tell you that story that I promised. At my home monastery, I was a novice nun. And for a long period of time, I was in charge of meditation retreats. I was kind of the coordinator. And so people were sitting in the meditation hall, and I had some other duties. I was in the tea area in the hallway getting some tea. A guy walked in and said, blah, blah, blah. As far as I was concerned, because I wasn't tuned in, I was getting my tea mindfully, slowly during a meditation retreat. He had said something that was actually pretty important. But I didn't know that. And I turned to him. We often got tourists. We often got people just driving through, even sometimes locals want to see the place. And I said, oh, hi, welcome. Are you here for the retreat? He said, retreat. And he said, no. And I said, oh, okay, well, welcome to just, kind of hang out and see the grounds. I said, no, we are having a meditation retreat. If you want to, you can tiptoe into the meditation hall and sit in the back. I said, or you can go around, just, try to be quiet because it is a retreat. And he said, I don't think I can do that. I'm here with my buddy. I'm like, okay, well, this might not be the best time for you to visit then if you don't think you could visit quietly. He gave me a very strange look and left. I went out of town. When I came back, turns out that there had been an uproar in my absence because the carpenters had quit the work on the the carpenters had quit the work on building or revamping a cottage in the back of the property. And they said that sister, I went by sister back then as a novice, Sister Sudhamma had ordered them to stop working. And that was announced in the business meeting in the hall after the chanting. Well, yeah, they were supposed to be here all week, but Sister Sudhamma told them there's a retreat and they can't work. And so I come back to this, and I was officially punished. There was actually a list of other things that I had done wrong, absolutely none of which was right. Not one, not one. Every single one was some kind of wrong perception. It was really quite an experience for me. I really, really, really wanted to learn from it, but there wasn't a single one that was right. What I finally learned from it was that I was somebody of a kind of a harsh, bossy nature, of whom people would believe those things. And so I got the lesson out of it that way. That my peers, the people in the holy life and the lay people around, saw me in that light. And so I needed to acknowledge that. I needed to see that. I needed to learn from it. So I actually did make use of it, but there were some tears. There were some tears. I was seriously being punished. I was almost, my residency was at risk, especially regarding that particular incident of throwing out the carpenters. And so the carpenters insisted it was true. When I questioned, why would they make up such a thing as that? And so we had this meeting with Bhante Rahula and me and the head carpenter and a guy in the monastery who was not mad at me. Somebody who was on my side, I grabbed him. And so we sat in the conference room, and he repeated, what I had said. And as we talked and talked, I finally realized I'm face blind, pretty much face blind. I had no idea I had met this guy. I didn't know who the carpenters were. I'd never been introduced to them. The thing the man said when he walked in the door was, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, one of the carpenters. We're here to work." I didn't hear it because I was getting a cup of tea. I didn't know that somebody was coming in to say something like that. It was a retreat. I was not tuned in. I just heard some blah, 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 blah in the background, turned around and greeted him as graciously as anyone possibly could have. So when we sorted it all out, we had a good laugh. Crisis averted. Ayya Sudhamma had not thrown out the carpenters, or at least not knowingly done so. Yeah, that whole list. One of the other things on the list of things I got punished for was that I had left notes all over the women's dorm that were very bossy. The fact is that every note I'd ever written had been taken down by a person who was bossier than me. And she had substituted her own notes. There was not one single note in that dorm in my handwriting. And there was one that a board member had been particularly offended by that I had supposedly written. It was a note about toilet flushing to save the septic system. And the note said, this is going to crack you up in hearing it in English, German speaking. If it's yellow, it's mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. And the board member was very offended that Sudhamma, Sister Sudhamma, had written this offensive thing and posted it in the toilet stalls. This had been Bhante Rahula's thing. And a different nun had written it down as he dictated it. And the group had voted on it and put it up. And it was on my list of the things that I had done. That's what I'm saying. Like, not one item of the list had any factual basis. The only factual basis is that it was believable. And so this is a great example of this, that whole list of things that I got in trouble for while I was out of town. Every single one was factually wrong. And as a whole, the entire list was true. It was true. It was true as to the nature of this person that was being criticized. Even if it got all the facts absolutely off. Don't see any other comments here. Yes.
So you said about the study that one just hears every third word.
Yeah.
Do you think that changed with the level of sati or the level of if you're mindful or not, or does it depend? I thought about if it depends on if you're in your own thinking, because the mind loves to go on the own thinking that it's used to, and so it skips every 2 words just for.
Okay, so people, just realized people probably can't hear your voice over there. The question here is whether mindfulness, sati, could influence how much one actually does pick up on words that people are saying. I can only speculate, but I absolutely would say that's probably the case, and particularly when you add in daydreaming as a normal response to particularly a lengthy conversation, then it would be, even more so. But somebody who has a habit of mindfulness, a habit of presence, I cannot imagine it would be otherwise, but I cannot say for sure. Okay. Manal asked, it's nice to see some lightness in acknowledgement of wrong perception. Laughing face. I would often beat myself up for such things. Ayya, would you mind sharing how one can be kind to oneself with this? Oh, what a wonderful question. And Kit comments, it's a surprisingly apt story for my life in misperception. Thanks for giving me much to think about. By answering that Manal's question, but if anyone needs to leave, please feel perfectly free to do that, whether in person or online. Okay, so how do you not beat yourself up about this business of wrong perception? Same way one doesn't beat oneself up in general. For me, I did come from a past of very painful self-hate. And I worked on this in various ways over the years, all kinds of modalities, therapies, mindfulness, everything. But I think there actually came a moment that was a turning point for me, where my self-directed negativity was so harsh and cruel that I recoiled from it and said, wow, that was Mara. I'm done. I basically said, I'm on my own side from now on. Anything that I perceived to be such a voice of self-cruelty, doubt, self-bullying, any kind of meanness, I just reject it altogether. Say, no, that is not my friend. I don't have to listen to that kind of meanness. That's not allowed. That's not allowed here. No, I'm on my side. The people who are really good people who have this kind of habit of negative self-talk and negative cruelty to oneself tend to immediately fear that they're going to run amok as soon as they're not mean to themselves. That is not what will happen. Actually, self-compassion, self-kindness goes a very long way towards helping you act in ways that you respect. You don't run amok. There's a book called The Willpower Instinct. Kelly McGonigal, that's who it is. Actually, it was a YouTube video by her. So she wrote this book, but she also has some YouTube videos. And in one of her videos, a brain scientist named Kelly McGonigal found that they did this experiment where they had a large group of, I think they were all middle-aged lady dieters. Anyway, they were a bunch of dieters, people who were trying to lose weight. And they were given, they all had gathered for this experiment. I don't know why dieters signed up for this kind of experiment, but they did. And the scientist gave them all a donut, but they didn't just give them a donut. There was a variety of donuts, and each person had to choose a donut. So there was this guilt, this complicity that they had cooperated, that they had chosen a donut. They ate their donuts, and then they had some discomfort. They were divided into two groups. One group was given a forgiveness message, the other was not. The group that was given the forgiveness message was told, oh, we heard some people felt uncomfortable about the donut. Don't worry, we asked you to eat the donut. Everybody else ate the donut. Please just don't worry about it. Then they were given a task, and they watched to see how they did the task differently based on whether they got the forgiveness message or not. And the task was to eat candies and rate the quality of the candies. And the samples that they had a kind of unlimited access to the samples. The samples were weighted. So the scientists knew exactly how much candy a person took of this one to say whether it's good, or this one to say how it, how good it is. And I don't remember the number. I'm a little weak with numbers, but it was some outrageous number. Like the ones without the forgiveness message ate something like 75% more candy than the dieters who did not get the forgiveness message. So my friend Manal, keep that in mind. When we're walking around with forgiveness towards ourselves, love towards ourselves, a willingness to be on one's own side, no matter what, then how we hold ourselves in the world is going to be more skilled. It's going to be more beautiful. So that is my recommendation to you. Be on your own side. Be like a lawyer arguing for you, for your well-being, for your goodness. Don't let the bullies in your head take over. Okay. All right. So with that, we will close.